Listen, I've been trying to make a review of this game for half a year and I can never write anything coherent. I can't even form a clear opinion about literally any aspect of this game, and I'm starting to suspect there's a reason for it. So I decided to just share my thoughts. Don't treat it as a review. I'm afraid it's a bit too personal, which makes it a bit unfair. It's Leaf, and today we're talking about Sunhaven. Sunhaven is a fantasy-themed farm sim with elements of story-driven RPG, developed by an indie studio, Pixel Sprout. It's been in early access for a year and a half, and during that time it's changed considerably. It still has a long way to go, but it's continuously being worked on. Sunhaven is exactly what happens when someone sees Stardew Valley and goes, "Hey, I can do that too, but I want it to be more to my liking and more ambitious." And they actually do it and succeed, at least in the more part, because if there's one thing that can be said about Sunhaven with 100% certainty, it's that it's very extra. Stardew Valley revived the genre. Its release marks the renaissance of farm sims, but if that's the case, then Sunhaven went straight to bloody baroque. It's full of things. It has more races, more towns, more farms, more characters, more buildings, more creatures, and unfortunately, very little depth. Maybe it's unfair of me to say something like that. This game is, after all, still unfinished, but with every update, I feel like it's being expanded in size rather than in meaningful content. For example, the main town was quite large to begin with. It took time to learn where everything was, and then they made it even bigger. Sure, it's pretty and it looks like a proper town now, but it takes longer to get anywhere and even learn the layout. It's especially painful at the beginning when we move quite slowly and we don't remember what's where. Even the detailed map doesn't quite help as much as it could, especially since there are some dead ends we need to remember about that are not clearly visible on the map. Not gonna lie, I get turned around easily, but usually not on a flat 2D board with no perspective. Of course, the fact that I was already used to the old layout adds to my current confusion. I had very similar problems while playing Stardew Valley Expanded. Either way, I feel like the maps in Sunhaven are now too big. The larger the area, the more difficult it is to fill it with actual content. Even increasing the amount of NPCs doesn't help if they serve no purpose other than being a decoration. It's a 2D pixel art town in a farm simulation game, not a 3D open world experience. Exploring it works only once, the first time you see it. After that, no matter how nice looking, it quickly turns into an obstacle between you and your goal. Maybe it's just me, but the relatively long walks between my farm and important parts of town, especially when I can't move that fast, are always a bit annoying. Fortunately, you can get a mount, and it helps, but mounts are not available for purchase in the main town. I was very excited to discover a taxi service that we can unlock, but it turned out that Clive's carriage only runs between the main town and the eastern forest. So yes, locations are indeed quite pretty, but unnecessarily bloated, just like this video. And it seems to be true about the whole game at this point. Well, not the whole game, I'm being very unfair here, because with the addition of seasons, planting and caring for crops is now pretty involved. We've got seasonal effects and seasonal pests, and scarecrows and totems to help us deal with those problems. But there's still only one festival, and there's virtually nothing to make this place feel like a community. It's literally just a bunch of random people occupying the same space. Yes, some NPCs are seen spending time next to each other, but that's it. They sit there for a while, then get up and go on their own merry way. They don't even pretend to do anything together. We've got marriage, but our spouse won't move in with us, nor will they change any of their daily routines. Romance is strictly tied to our friendship meter, and a date option will pop up as a quest after we've reached 3 hearts. Now, when it does, we can set it up or ignore it, or even set it up but forget about it. However, the game will treat it as if it happened. And after a while, the second date will become available, even if we never had the first one. There are no special cutscenes, all dates follow the same pattern. The first one takes place in the morning in the favorite spot of a given NPC, the second one takes place at their home in the afternoon, and that's when we can decide whether we want to enter a serious relationship or not. When I say the interactions are shallow, I don't mean there's not enough talking. Oh no, there's a fair amount of it in the entire game, and the dates rely entirely on talking. So, what seems to be the problem? Well, the actual lines. And it's not like they're too simple. No, I wish that were the case. The thing is, they try to be deep, but come across as artificial and empty. There are many romanceable NPCs, but the social mechanics are very basic, not to mention buggy. Okay, on to the next thing. We end up with 3 farms. Traveling between them is relatively painless, fortunately. There are some crops that can only be grown on one of them, but there are very few reasons to try to maintain all 3. Which, frankly speaking, is probably a blessing because there are only so many hours in a day. But then again, we kind of feel bad for wasting all that space we've been given. I quickly learned that I only use those additional farms to grow story-related crops, and then I just forget about them and ignore them. So, yeah, this game has problems, but I shouldn't really complain about the game itself, rather about the priorities of its creators. I'd rather have more meaningful relationships than a bigger map. I'd rather have more to do in one town than have 3 homes in 3 places. I'd rather have more personal quests from the NPCs than random bosses that I can fight or ignore with no consequences. Granted, this game has a story, and all those additional locations are linked to it. Our ultimate goal is not to actually be a farmer or a craftsman, but to become a hero. That changes things quite a bit. Farming, mining, fishing, fighting, and crafting are, when we think about it, only a means to an end, and more along the lines of snacks rather than the main course. And this is what I meant when I said this game was extra. I didn't only mean the overblown maps and an abundance of useless NPCs, but the fact that this game tries to be everything. Actually, it reminds me more of Rune Factory than Stardew Valley in this respect. I can't deny it's ambitious, and I'm interested to see if it succeeds in the end, but at this point, a year and a half after the initial release, it's still kinda too basic, and it's too easy, I think, to lose interest in it. But let's not give up hope just yet. It's not like it's a bad game. Some time ago I made a review of Coral Island, and my lukewarm reaction is rather noticeable. That's because some of its story has been lifted from Stardew Valley almost scene by scene. And because the characters seem very flat, most people are the same, aggressively positive and allergic to something. That's literally all I can remember about them after spending a couple of dozen hours playing the game. In Sunhaven, characters actually have some personal traits, not particularly deep, but existing. Lynn likes tradition and is very proud of her origins. Anne likes her business prowess being praised. Nathaniel is a bit simple but honorable, believes in his calling as a soldier and cares about his recruits. Zyla likes people with character, so don't bother trying to kiss up to her. And Darius is unpleasant, condescending, and likes those who submit to his treatment without question. Simplistic? Yes, but at least befriending these characters actually requires a somewhat flexible approach. And the game has its own story. Yes, it's quite literally the battle of light against darkness, which is not terribly original, but all in all, Sunhaven is definitely its own thing. Now, how this own thing has been achieved is a different matter, because playing Sunhaven is like reading a fanfic. A Frankenstein's monster of fanfics is a patchwork of anime and fantasy tropes. It's a Westerner's take on the Japanese-made Western-style fantasy, if that makes any sense. All the races we can choose from during character creation, demons, angels, elves, furries, Amari, they all cater to a certain crowd. All the NPCs as well. We've got a slightly older doctor with a relatively sad past, a busty, experienced lady who likes money, and a feisty red-headed fire mage. We've got a no-nonsense captain of the guard with a chiseled jaw, an imposing prickly demon prince, and an elven boy who's so free-spirited he flies with the wind, except for the opening scene where he's taken a train for some reason. We've got a nice and caring anime guy who is there only to be nice and caring in anime, and even a pink-haired cat girl who says "nya." And the dog boy. We can't forget about the dog boy. Okay, tell me you're a nerdy weeb without telling me you're a nerdy weeb. I mean, I'm a nerdy weeb with decades of experience, and even I bend under the weight of all that tropey cringe. Probably because of all those decades of experience. Given that the creators of this game can't possibly all be teenagers, I assume Sunhaven is some sort of a release valve. It allows them to let it all out in one go. It feels like they're trying to stuff the game with everything they like, but couldn't find an outlet for. And I actually admire this approach, because they don't give a damn. It's like they needed an excuse to make a certain type of anime-flavored fantasy adventure, and now they found it in a farm simulation genre that allows simplistic 2D graphics, no voice acting, and people don't actually mind at all. This game is a pure labor of love, not towards this particular game genre, although I'm sure that too, but first and foremost, love towards a certain type of world building and aesthetics. Speaking of aesthetics, Sunhaven is very colourful and whimsical. All three towns have their distinct design and feel. Every character is unique, and there's a lot of visual detail. It is somewhat over the top though. Okay, it's really over the top at times, and I can't decide whether to hold it against it or not. I mean, there is no excuse for creating something as gaudy as Nivara. It's basically Hayao Miyazaki on LSD, there's no other way to describe it. It's like people at Pixel Sprout have no notion of restraint whatsoever. There are some really pretty magical places in this game, but everything is so chock full of detail, it's overwhelming. There are so many lights and sparkles and fantastical costumes and creatures and big hair and ribbons and leaves and flowers that it all loses meaning. Now, I understand it's a question of taste, besides, who am I to tell anyone what they should do with their imagination, but I do find it a bit childish and a bit unprofessional, but then again, as I already said, it's a huge love letter to fantasy anime, especially from the 90s. And that's exactly what it feels like. Not like the thing it wants to be, but a fanfic, a fan art, made by a rather young person. Maybe I should just treat it as yet another sign that the creators don't give a damn. If they want to throw literally everything they can in their game, they're absolutely free to do so, and I don't have to like it. But I still kinda do. I like this bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, unrestrained approach. It is naive and immature, but in a way endearing. And I realize how patronizing I sound, and that worries me. I'm probably simply too old for this. I don't mind kitsch, but it's a bit too kitschy. I won't get all excited about playing as a cat girl or an angel anymore, nor will my heart race at the thought of marrying an abusive demon prince. Instead, I will spend my days peacefully growing crops and mining and eventually start dating the local doctor, which seems to be a running theme for me, then get sorely disappointed with how little depth there is to him and try to regain my interest in the game by more diligently following the main quest, to eventually lose it again for months, forget what the whole thing was about, and after a while, start another playthrough from scratch. It is as simple as that. I am probably too old for Sunhaven. Even so, I am impressed with it. Because of its relatively rich story, the gameplay mechanics are a bit different than usual. There's no stamina, for example, so you can run around mining and chopping trees as much as you like. You will pass out at midnight, but then again, you can change the length of the day. There's also a rather extensive level up system, similar to the one in my time at Sandrock, where you level up skills as you use them. You can then spend your points on skill-related perks that actually make a noticeable difference. Other than that, there are also nice little quality of life improvements, like those one-click buttons that allow you to buy or craft one item or 5 or 20 or all available. I didn't even know I needed that until I got it. Of course, there are also those useful sorting buttons for containers. You only need to remember that if something is in your quick bar, it won't be taken into account. Combat system is simplistic, but it works. Kinda. Enemy pathing is somewhat questionable, and the mobs notoriously get stuck on things, even when they should technically be able to walk around. There's a lot of fighting though. In the mines, once you've killed all the enemies on a certain level, they won't respawn until your next visit. But enemies you encounter while exploring the world respawn incredibly quickly, to kinda keep you on your toes and also allow for mob farming and level grinding. Not something I value in a game, but given the presence of both fetch quests and location-based leaps in difficulty, it happens to be rather useful here. All in all, there are quite a few things to do in Sunhaven. There is a story, there is romance, even if very rudimentary, there are all the activities that we expect to find in a farm simulation, and actually more. There's even a multiplayer, although I myself never tried it. As I already mentioned, Sunhaven is big. Too big, and with not enough depth, but with a lot of promise. I wish there was more music, because when a certain very short theme, no matter how pretty it is, loops endlessly while you're trying to make your way through 10 levels of mines, you can either turn off the sound or go mad. There is no third option. I know I'm treating this game way too harshly. I keep saying it has no depth, but then I admit there's no shortage of things to do. I praise the fact that every character is unique, but then I complain that the interactions are superficial. But that's just it. Sunhaven is very uneven. It promises a lot more than it delivers. It has solid gameplay, but mediocre writing. Vast maps, but filled with superficial details, potentially interesting, but insufficiently explored characters. I realize it is unfinished, but I can only hope that the contents will at some point match the intricate packaging. If that ever happens, this game will be truly amazing. Okay, so I had my fun, but I have to say one thing. An enormous amount of work went into this game, and it shows. And despite everything I said before, despite my condescending tone and jokes, I have nothing but respect for its creators. Do I recommend this game? Yes. Once you play it, you will remember it. It's garish and it has its problems, but it's also bold and never apologizes for what it is. If you're allergic to anime, you will hate it though. If you like anime, you may be put off by the fact that it's a make-believe version and not the real deal. If you're hoping for an extensive social experience and a dating sim, you will be sorely disappointed. But if you want to grow crops, mine, fish, cook, cut down trees and remove grass and small bushes that for some reason look like Winnie the Pooh's piglet rendered as a green version of the Scream guy, you should be absolutely satisfied. I am very curious. I want to see this game change and grow. I'm sure I will never get as invested as in Stardew Valley or my time at Sandrock, because as much as I admire its whimsical creativity, it's not quite my type of flavor. Technically, it should be. I should at least perceive it as an ultimate guilty pleasure, but I don't, which is weird. So it either fails to satisfy its own target group, or I am no longer a part of it and I am older and more fussy than I care to admit, which is probably the case. Either way, give it a try. And that's it for today. Thanks a lot for watching and Happy New Year!